1, 2, test, test.
Good evening, and thank you very much for being here. I want to acknowledge the community and the engagement in this issue. I also want to acknowledge Chairman Khan and the Business Committee of the Chumash Band of Indians, and Supervisor Williams cannot be here today. He had to be in Kiama. So first of all, would you join me for the pledge? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today is the second of two meetings to talk about the full proposed Memorandum of Agreement and the documents related to it. The agreement has been posted for your review on the county's ad hoc website, and it's also on the county's Board of Supervisors website. This evening's meeting will track closely what we discussed last Thursday morning, October 5th at the Vets Hall. We wanted to have two meetings so that we could have one in the morning for people who couldn't come at night and one in the evening for people who couldn't come in the morning, and also to allow people to assimilate some of the materials and ask more questions if they had them. So much of our material today will be repeated from Thursday morning's meeting, but we are distinguishing in color what's new and what's what you've seen before. The meeting materials, the PowerPoint narrative answers to the Thursday were posted Thursday morning, and these materials with the new responses are being posted today. The proposed Memorandum of Agreement is a product of many, many different factors, including public engagement, the foundation built by the ad hoc committee with Supervisor Peter Adam and Supervisor Doreen Farr, comment letters, consultation with council and with outside counsel, and conversations with our contacts in Washington, D.C. Please believe me that our conversations with people in the community and all the responses and questions have provided guiding principles for these discussions. I want to make a note that I'm going to use the term proposed Memorandum of Agreement to indicate that it has not yet been adopted and executed. So it's tentative, it's proposed, and if it is voted on by both the tribal membership and the Board of Supervisors, then it will go through a process that we'll describe, and it would be executed. So this is, I've seen some email posts that say, well, it's just proposed. Well, it is, because it hasn't gone final, and it won't go final until the Board of Supervisors and others are involved. As you all are aware, these were extremely difficult negotiations, influenced by a number of outside factors, and those made these discussions even more challenging and added far greater urgency than the previous ad hoc subcommittee faced. And I want to just identify four of those factors for you. The January 19th action by the U.S. Department of the Interior that changed the status of Camp 4. The county's litigation that was filed in district court. The fact that Congress is poised to act on H.R. 1491, and I'd like to come back to that, and also that the Supreme Court will soon hear arguments about whether or not Congress has the right to dismiss fee-to-trust litigation via legislation. And I'd like to make a note here that H.R. 1491 purports to dismiss or to uphold the Secretary of Interior's administrative action. 1491 says nothing about litigation in district court. So going back to the fact that Congress is poised to act on 1491, in May I went back and met with people at Interior, met with people in the Senate and in the House, and I asked members of Congress to please wait on 1491, allowing us time to negotiate an agreement that could be referenced in 1491. So it was a strategy to hold off and allow us time to negotiate. We had 2 new people in leadership positions, actually 3 with Supervisor Williams. And so they said, well, we've been waiting, but we'll grant you some time. But time was running out, they were clear to say. I met with Norma Torres, representative from Upland, and I was later very disappointed to see what she had said about it. She said, and I quote, "Local government has failed to ink an agreement with the tribe, so now it is up to us in Congress to act." And I'm afraid that reflects a lot of the attitude with some of the members of Congress that I met with. I understand that many people are concerned about the timeline, and I just want you to know that our lobbyists in Washington are telling us that 1491 is poised to move through the full House on a suspension calendar, a method that they use to quickly pass bills that they deem non-controversial. So this bill has been stripped of recitals and is ready to move. Now, the next point I'm going to make is a really important one, so please listen. What if we do not have a local agreement in place? Then the county and the community risk having no say in land use on Camp 4, none. Without a local agreement, we could find ourselves at great risk. Let me explain what happens without a local agreement. Congressman Duncan Hunter from San Diego area wrote to the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, and he said, "You approved housing at the BIA, but instead we have a parking lot for a casino. How did that happen? Can't you change that?" And I'm going to give you 3 different quotes about what the Secretary responded. The first in his letter to Duncan Hunter was, "Although we understand the community's concern, once land is taken into trust, the department is not authorized to reconsider its decision because land cannot be taken out of trust without congressional authorization." The letter continued, "In addition, regulations do not authorize the department to impose restrictions on a tribe's future use of land which has been taken into trust." And finally, the department has been reluctant to take any action to eliminate the flexibility that Indian tribes enjoy to change the use of trust lands, both because it is an aspect of tribal sovereignty and because it is a needed tool to adapt to changed economic conditions. So that is how the federal government interprets the law that governs fee to trust. Neither the county nor the tribe made that law, but that law means that without a local agreement, there are no guarantees about what could happen on Camp 4. With a local agreement, we have a contract between 2 parties, and those parties can work together and make their own law that supersedes that federal law. We can make a contract that is enforceable, and it would then be up to the Secretary of Interior to actually approve that. And what we learned in Congress is they're very eager to have these local agreements. Some people have claimed that the proposed agreement gives the county nothing. I'm here to tell you that it's just the opposite. We have nothing without the agreement. Let me repeat. Without an agreement, we are stuck with what I quoted above, no restrictions. With an agreement, we have a private contract that the parties can enforce, and the DOI's reluctance to eliminate flexibility is addressed by the private agreement where both parties are bound by the terms they have agreed to. So, what does the proposed agreement offer? With this agreement, we're holding the tribe to building housing for their tribal membership and a tribal center, 2 of the tribe's objectives that both the county and the community have voiced support for. The agreement provides assurances for land use through 2040, 23 years. This period conforms to the time frame for which a community plan or a general plan usually lasts before being updated by the jurisdiction. While of course I would have preferred a longer term, this is the longest term that we believe the Department of the Interior would approve. The Department of Interior doesn't favor long-term encumbrances on Indian lands. In our research of local agreements of this type, this is the longest period that we could find embedded in an agreement. In addition, Section 20 of the agreement contains mutual reopener language. Both parties must agree, and I emphasize both mutual, it's not unilateral. Both parties must agree, and it provides an opportunity, if both parties agree, for the tribe and the county to sit down in the future to discuss possible terms for an extension. Importantly, this agreement creates a path forward for improved dialogue between the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians and the county. We're not always going to agree, and we certainly didn't agree in the negotiations. And there were tense, difficult times. But we do have overlapping interests and concerns, and it's important to continue a conversation. This agreement commits the tribe to Alternative B in the environmental assessment. Under Alternative B, there will be approximately 131 acres protected as resource management zones, 869 acres designated as open space, recreation, and trails, and 206 acres will remain in agriculture. So more than 1,200 acres, or 84% of 1,427 acres at Camp 4, will not be developed for the term of the agreement. And finally, both Alternative B in the environmental assessment and H.R. 1491 explicitly state that no gaming would occur on the property. I quote from Alternative B of the environmental assessment, quote, "No gaming would occur on the subject property," end quote. There are many more details that you will see outlined in the PowerPoint, and there are more specific narratives in the handout and the citations to show you where in the EA the issue is being referenced. I know there have also been questions about the scope of the agreement, and I want to assure you that we explored many, many options about neighboring properties and creative strategies. But due to a variety of factors, particularly the pending legislation in DC, the discussion settled on the Camp 4 property. I'd also like to mention a few words about my partner on the ad hoc committee, Supervisor Doss Williams. Unequivocally, and at no point in our negotiations was he acting outside of what was in the best interests of the county or outside of our negotiating objectives. He was a staunch advocate for open space and protections of resource management zones. There was also a question about our September 25th meeting, where we just presented the proposed terms of the agreement and not the agreement in full. We did that because it frequently happens that you get the major terms, but it takes a lot of research and a lot of final careful work to put the final touches on the agreement. Within an hour of penning the final agreement, it was posted on the website. So tonight we'll be walking through the proposed agreement in Alternative B of the environmental assessment to make clear what is being proposed for Camp 4. And we'll be formally responding to the comments that came from our last meeting, and you'll see those in red. And we're continuing to take comments from people, and we'll be rolling these out on the website as we get them answered. And just as in the last meeting, we'll receive and document all of your comments, and to the extent we can, we'll respond. Because of pending litigation, we're not able to respond to every single question. I kindly ask that everyone keep today's conversation respectful to all parties. Our negotiations have benefited from civility and respect, and I know that we can continue that decorum today. We'll be following the same rules as for a Board of Supervisors meeting. I ask that you refrain from applause and cheering. Every individual here is welcome to make their feelings heard and during the public comment period. And these speaker forms have, if you're willing to talk for 1 minute, we'll ask those people to come up first, and 3 minutes, and you'll have an opportunity to speak for the full 3 minutes if that's what you would like to do. This meeting is being recorded, and we want to create a record of civility. So with that, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Williams' Chief of Staff, Darcel Elliott. She has a statement from him.
Thank you, Supervisor Hartman. As Joan said, I'm Supervisor Williams' Chief of Staff, and there was a special meeting called tonight for the Cuyama Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which DOS serves on, which is why he couldn't be here this evening. But I just wanted to speak and reiterate, especially one point that Joan made during her statement, which is about the protection of open space that we got into the agreement. So most of you know that DOS served the San Ynez Valley for 6 years in the California State Assembly. And during those 6 years, I was his representative to the San Ynez Valley. If you've been to our meetings previously, we've talked about the neighborhood committee that we formed. And I was the staffer that organized that committee and met with people all throughout the valley in 2011 about their concerns and what issues were the things that they wanted us to work on the most. And Camp 4 was the #1 issue that came up during those meetings. And I also was the person that met with that group of community members every single month for the first year in office. And our position has been consistent throughout this entire time. DOS his #1 issue has always been the protection of open space. He's been an advocate for the environment, well-known advocate for the environment his entire career. And our biggest thing that we really try to fight for over these last 7 years now has been a buffer between Camp 4 and Highway 246 and 154, so that we can retain some sort of rural feel still for the valley. That's been our biggest goal, and we believe that we've achieved that with this agreement. And so I know I've talked to a lot of some of you in this room. Most people that I've worked with over the last 6 years have kind of phased out a little bit and not been as involved recently. But I know that this agreement, some of you are frustrated because this agreement isn't what some of you wanted to see. But the gamble that we're facing, which Joan alluded to, is Camp 4 being taken into trust without an agreement in place, and where the county would get nothing and have no say over what goes on there. This is a gamble we've been facing all these years, and it's a risk that's far too great for DOS, and that's been his position for the last 7 years. He's been consistent in that. And we believe that this agreement gives us the best possible outcome that we could get at this time. So thank you so much again for being here and for all of your dedication and work on this issue. Thanks.
And before I turn it over to Chairman Khan, I just want to recognize the tribe's business committee here in the front row. They attended each of these meetings with the county, traveled to Santa Barbara more often than we traveled up here. They have taken this very seriously, and I think we all learned a great deal in this process. So Chairman Khan?
Yeah, the business committee was just making sure I didn't give away the farm. Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see many of our neighbors out here, and also a couple of new faces today. This is the Tribal Housing Initiative is an extremely important issue for the tribe and also for the community. We certainly appreciate you guys all coming out and showing your interest and helping show us what concerns are out there. As most of you know, our reservation, our tribe, has one of the smallest land bases in the state of California. Our existing reservation is approximately 140 acres with about 100 homes in 3 different residential zones, with a combined commercial area totaling just 13 acres. A majority of our reservation is Marshy Creek area and undevelopable hillsides. Tribal housing is our most important issue. It's an issue that we've carried on throughout the years, and we're glad and we're proud that we finally have the opportunity to address it. As you know, the tribe is landlocked. We're geographically restricted, and Camp 4 was our first opportunity. Our tribal government has developed expansive education programs. We celebrate our language and have published a beautiful language dictionary. Our cultural department and elders council work hard to teach our children about our history, our customs, and our traditions. The tribe operates a full-service health clinic providing medical, dental, and behavioral health. All of these tribal government services are developed with self-determination and cultural preservation in mind. The tribal housing or housing on tribal trust land is vital to the survival of our culture. Some federal programs are dependent upon us having a reservation. So a lot of the opportunities we have for serving our community are really only made possible with reservation and with trust land. Today, most of our members don't even live on the reservation. About 60% of our membership live within the community. And we're working hard with you and with our membership to find a common sense solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a Brown Act hearing, and so part of the agenda is for public comment on matters not on today's agenda, but the entire agenda is devoted to this issue. So do we have any?
I have not received any speaker slips for items not on the agenda.
Okay, and before we get started, let me just introduce who's up here. Gina Fisher with the 3rd District staff, and she's overseeing the public comment part of it. And Darcel Elliott, Chief of Staff for Supervisor Williams, and Rachel Van Mullum, she's County Counsel, and Terry Mosnisic, who's the Assistant CEO, the second in charge at the county, and then Sam Cohen, Counsel for the Tribe, and of course Chairman Khan. So with that, Ms. Mosnisic.
Thank you, Supervisor Hartman. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all again today. I'm going to go over the PowerPoint again. For those of you that were at the prior meeting, it's going to be a bit repetitive. We just want to make sure we're imparting the same information to everyone. I have, however, updated it, as the supervisor mentioned, to highlight some of the key questions that were posed, so we augmented the PowerPoint so it'll be clear to you where I've made those changes. In addition, I just want to take note of something that is on the back table. When you all came in, there were a number of different handouts provided for you. One of them was our amended summary of responses to a number of the questions that were posed over the course of the last 2 meetings, as well as online, and some of the correspondence that was provided. However, in addition, in the back of the room, and this is provided by the county, it is up on our website as well, and it's entitled Summary of Ad Hoc Subcommittee's Responses to Questions Posed by Community, September 25th, 2017, October 5, 2017, and through Ad Hoc Subcommittee's website. There is also a document in the back of the room that indicates summary reply to the summary of responses. That's not via the county. That was provided by, I believe, one of the folks here. So I just wanted to distinguish the two. One is the responses, and then one is a response from the community, I believe. It's just to distinguish. Okay, to go ahead and kick everything off, I wanted to again begin with the charge to the Ad Hoc Subcommittee. The Ad Hoc Subcommittee was established back in August of 2015, and it was reestablished in February of 2017 with the new Ad Hoc Subcommittee members, Supervisors Hartman and Williams. The charge to both committees were by the direction of the Board of Supervisors, which indicated that we were to engage the San Ynez Band of the Chumash Indians in discussions related to land use and financial matters of mutual concern that include but are not limited to the waiver of sovereign immunity, and I'll discuss this more in depth later in the presentation. San Ynez Valley properties of interest, inclusive of Camp 4, Mooney and Escobar, and the 350-acre Triangle properties, and other general topics between the county and the tribe as appropriate. Again, that was the charge from the Board of Supervisors. The initial Ad Hoc Subcommittee met in public meetings with the tribe on 9 occasions from September 2015 through October of 2016. And for those of you that attended those initial meetings, you might recall that there were several key issue topic areas that were covered and represented on the prior matrix that we used quite frequently. And that was the waiver of sovereign immunity, the term, municipal finance, future use of land use and limits, which was an all-encompassing type of category that covered gaming, Williamson Act, and the issue of fee to trust in total. Just a little bit more in terms of background to kind of follow some of the key events. As I mentioned, in August and September of 2015, the Board of Supervisors established and clarified the role of the ad hoc subcommittee, initially with former supervisors Doreen Farr and Supervisor Adam. On January 10th, Supervisors Hartman and William were in fact appointed to serve on the ad hoc subcommittee. And then on January 10th, the board directed that County Council initiate federal litigation if the BIA Regional Director decision was affirmed to take the land or Camp 4 into trust. Very soon thereafter, on January 19th, the Interior did affirm the Regional Director's decision to take Camp 4 into trust and concluded that adequate NEPA review had occurred. On January 28th, the County Council filed in District Court regarding that matter. On February 7th, the Board of Supervisors renewed the short-term advisory ad hoc subcommittee, and they specifically authorized Supervisors Hartman and William to meet directly with the tribal leadership. And in February 2017, we then began those meetings, both the ad hoc subcommittee and staff, and they met on 9 occasions. We met on 9 occasions. Supervisor Hartman mentioned some external factors that impacted these discussions, and I just wanted to reiterate them so it was clear what the environment was. And as she mentioned, on January 19th, there was the action by the Department of the Interior that allegedly changed the status of Camp 4. And then, as I already mentioned, litigation had been filed in federal district court. And as also mentioned, Congress is poised to act on 1491. And the Supreme Court will soon hear arguments about whether or not Congress has the right to dismiss fee to trust litigation. And I'll discuss that a bit more in future slides. In order to carry on the discussions, the ad hoc subcommittee did identify several key guiding points that really helped shape the discussions moving forward. And those were that they wanted to build on the early work of the previous ad hoc subcommittee process. For those of you that attended those meetings, as I mentioned, a number of different topics were discussed. The waiver of sovereign immunity was discussed in the context of those meetings and those open public meetings, and was basically resolved in that context. They wanted to recognize tribal sovereignty and self-governance. They wanted to recognize the need for tribal housing. The county has consistently communicated our understanding and respect for that need. They wanted to recognize the critical services provided both the county and the tribe. We have both unique and shared constituencies, and we wanted to recognize those services provided. The goal is to protect the rural character of the San Ynez Valley and provide greater certainty regarding development of Camp 4 and potential timing of that development. As also noted, a goal was to establish a strong model for discussions and relations moving forward, and to address fiscal and environmental impacts that were identified. As also mentioned, we did look at a broad array of options, continuing the prior discussions with the prior ad hoc. We looked at a number of different ideas that would be considered outside of the box to kind of probe a bit and see what was truly available for discussion. And then, as mentioned, the discussions were at times very intense, but we believe that they were both very well intense, sincere, and thorough. So what's in the agreement? Again, we provided the agreement several weeks ago, both as part of our set hearing item before the Board of Supervisors that occurred on October 3rd. So that information went out the Friday prior, the full agreement, and again, it's on our ad hoc committee website, and that was posted as soon as that was available, as soon as the set hearing occurred. So the key terms that we're going to be reviewing with you tonight are the waiver of sovereign immunity, again, the term, mitigation of fiscal and environmental impacts, safety and land use compliance, more specificity on land use we'll discuss with you today, and then dismissal and support provisions for both the legislation and the litigation. So at our last meeting on at the first meeting of September 25th, there were a number of different questions posed in the areas which I've noted on the screen. The scope of the agreement, the term, legislation, the support for that legislation, questions about the fiscal component, a number of questions about land use, questions about the enforceability and the waiver, and questions about the public process and timing. We did attempt to answer many of those in that initial response that we provided both on the website and in the back of the room at the last meeting and again today. And we did receive some additional questions in the areas listed. And then we also received, that's supposed to be in red, it doesn't look very red. We also received questions regarding the tribal land consolidation area. Those came to us from the actual meeting itself. The development options, there were some questions about Baseline and Linda Vista and other areas. There were questions about natural resources and part of the mitigation monitoring plan. You requested more specificity there. Questions about the location of the tribal hall, questions about traffic, and then solid waste hauling. And we're continuing to look at a number of the items that were brought to our attention, but we're providing what we can to you this evening, but we're continuing to work on items. So we'll begin answering a number of the questions, and we'll start again with land use. And I will be turning it over to Chairman Khan. I will just note that as we go through this, those items that you see, which is supposed to be read on the screen, are underlined and highlighted because those are augmenting some of the information that we provided to you previously.
Thank you, Terry. All right, well, you're looking at a Camp 4 land use map, and I'll point out some of the key areas, but real quick, it's really hard to see on here, and it looks like our color on the PowerPoint is a little off. So I'm going to read you from the legend the different zones, and then I'll point them out. We have the residential zone, agricultural zone, open space recreation zone, resource management zone, with the old woodland resource management zone, with riparian corridors, special purpose zone for government center, special purpose zone for public utilities, roads, and view corridor. So some of the ones of most interest would probably be the housing areas. These are all the red areas here, some down here, some down here. The agricultural zone, which is, of course, I can't even tell the different colors. Here we go, right here, in this area here. And then we've got...
And that currently exists, right? That was a question we got.
There is 265 acres of grapes currently existing here. We have open space, over 800 acres of open space, which is pretty much the larger yellow area. If I think is there printed maps in the front? Yes. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so your map should reflect. Well, maybe they don't have color.
There are color maps in the back of the room.
Okay, good.
If you did happen to
your
pick
map
them up.
should reflect the yellow area there. So follow along with me on the materials distributed. The special purpose zone where the government center is going to be right in this area. And then, of course, we have the roads, which are kind of scattered throughout. And then the view corridor, which is almost 1,000 feet along Highway 154, 1,000 feet from the road into the interior of the property, the entire length of the property along 154. So those are some of those main areas on Camp 4 land use. Next slide, please. Oh, do I have the... Land use. One of the most important things I've heard from, the largest concerns I've heard from the community is no gaming. No gaming allowed. We have that in the EA and the legislation. The tribe is to comply with the final EA, the FONSI, and Alternative B of the final EA as adopted May of 2014. These include no buildings on Camp 4 within 985 feet of State Highway 154, all required mitigation measures in the FONSI and final EA, Alternative B, be implemented. Compliance with the FONSI and final EA also shall not preclude solar energy on Camp 4. All forms of solar energy are prohibited on Camp 4 within the 985-foot view corridor along State Highway 154. Continuing on with land use, mitigation, monitoring plan, water, another very important issue. No export of water. Oop, I forget I'm controlling this thing. Sorry, guys. I failed again. This is what happens when you don't let staff do the PowerPoint. Okay, land use, mitigation, monitoring plan, water. No export of water. Water use in a drought year, no increase. In a non-drought year, plus 4 acre-feet per year increase, up to. 2005 Green Building Guidelines and LEED for homes criteria. Indoor plumbing, highest efficiency fixtures and fittings available. Less landscaping for clustered 1-acre lots than the 5-acre lots. Native landscaping and drought-tolerant species emphasized. Tertiary water treatment plant and recycling. Recycled water for landscaping. Recycled water for plumbing in all government buildings. Tribal hall. Recycled water for vineyards and all irrigation as feasible. A reduction in the vineyard by 50 acres and corresponding decrease in water use by 50 acre-feet. Areas outside of buildings and roads would be kept as permeable surfaces to the extent practicable. This is to promote groundwater recharge. Rooftop runoff directed towards vegetated areas and splash blocks and not underground storm drains, again to promote groundwater recharge. Special limits during periods declared as drought by the county, no turf grass irrigation. Remembered that time. Land use, continuing on. Limits on commercial. No commercial proposed. Ag commercial is currently allowed. There's 260, well, this says 206 acres of ag, but when we move forward with the project, we'll reduce the acreage of the vineyard, which will be 206 acres. Net decrease in commercial as no winery as there is no winery in approved project. Provisions of open space. As I pointed out earlier on the map, there's 869 acres of open space, recreational. We jokingly called DAS Open Space DAS in our meetings. We have 98 acres of resource management zone, titled as riparian area, 33 acres in the resource management zone of Oaks Woodland. Our tribal facilities, we have a 30-acre special purpose area. Tribal members and guests will be included in tribal events, functions, and ceremonies. We have 250 parking spaces. There are 100 events. Some examples would be language, cultural nights. There's AA meetings, 4-H, basket weaving. The list can go on. All of our government facilities have a zero tolerance with alcohol, so there is no liquor. Same rules as existing. Tribal design overlay. We'll have CC&Rs. We'll have a plan to be able to address a lot of those more detailed issues, as all communities have. No structures within 985 feet of Highway 154. Open space and recreational area adjacent to 154. Tribal housing separated from 154 by 985 feet. Open space zone. Sounding repetitive, but we're trying to be as clear as possible. Building heights. 75% of single-family residences are single-story. Residential structures compatible with surrounding residences. Traffic impact study. The traffic impact study includes fair share of 154 roundabout at 246, roundabout or signalization at 154 and Roblar with fair share of 2.6%. Assessed impacts to the operations of Baseline Road east of Edison Street, Armor Ranch Road, 1/3 of the lots on Armor Ranch Road in Alternative B have exact locations to be determined. So we have opportunities to offset. I know that the map shows the parcels really close to the road. Near-term cumulative conditions were established by reviewing the cumulative project database maintained by the county for projects within the San Ynez Valley. Tribe shall comply with Green Building Code. Tribe shall recycle 75% of solid waste generated on site. Vernal pool, fairy shrimp, wetland habitat buffer zones to be established around seasonal wetlands, migratory birds and other birds of prey, detailed protections and mitigation measures to address nesting birds. Terry, when am I passing this off to you? Oh, do I have 2 more to go? I'm getting tired over here. Should have took my nap earlier. Development options analyzed. Thank you, Sam. 1 acre assignments in the northeastern corner of project site. These are some of the options under alternative B. So this is gonna how we can mitigate some of the concerns with the setbacks and the way the homes are adjusted in the areas on the map. Did I jump over one? Let me go back one. Did I miss that? Yeah. Yes. Boy, I am in a hurry. Project development options. The EA lists 8 different layouts. There we go. 8 different layouts, which is known as Exhibit N. And I don't know if we have a slide for Exhibit N. Okay. Alternative B, selected to spread 1 acre lots into each buildable area to facilitate environmental analysis. The EA does provide for setbacks, but 985 feet only for Highway 154 as designated scenic highway.
And Chairman Kahn, if I could just add, there was, the EA studied Alternative A and Alternative B, and Alternative B had 8 different sub-options to explore, and the one that was analyzed was the one that had the most impacts and studied, so that if that was studied, then the others would be less impactful. I believe that's correct.
Yes. Sam concurs. All right. So these are a couple of the different options to really govern that, and I'll go over them really quick. 1 acre assignments in the northeast corner of the project site. 1 acre assignments in the northeast corner of the project site with an expanded vineyard. 1 acre assignments in 3 clusters in the northeastern, central, and south central portions of the project site. 1 acre assignments in 3 clusters in the northeastern, central, and south central portions of the project site with a setback off Armor Ranch Road. 1 acre assignments in the southeast corner of the project site. 1 acre assignments in the northwestern, and I know this would probably be more helpful with a map. Northwestern corner of the project site with a vineyard, moved to the east of the existing vineyard. 1 acre assignments in the northwestern corner of the project site with a vineyard, moved to the southwestern portion of the project site. And 1 acre assignments clustered in the central portion of the project site. Excellent. So this is attached to the EA as Exhibit N. Tribal Land Consolidation Area, TCA. The TCA was voluntarily withdrawn from the tribe. Thank you. Boy, I'm not going to get a job from the county, that's for sure. Tribal Land Consolidation Area. The TCA was voluntarily withdrawn from the tribe. The FEDA trust application and EA were resubmitted without the TCA on the second round. Current project has no TCA. The location of houses, in reference to Appendix N of the final EA. On October 11, 2013, the tribe withdrew without prejudice the approved plan and corresponding TCA via Resolution 926 with the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians Tribal Land Consolidation Area. The IBIA dismissed the appeals. The tribe prepared and submitted a revised trust acquisition application to the BIA, excluding the withdrawn plan and the TCA from the purpose as needed. So, Terry, you can have this back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those last 5 slides that the chairman reviewed were in addition to the PowerPoint from last week in an attempt to answer many of your questions. And then again, they're answered in more detail, of course summarized on a PowerPoint, but in more detail in the summary responses, again, if you'd like to refer to that. Moving on, some of the questions referred to the county land use policies. And as we've indicated before, as part of the San Ynez Valley Community Plan, pursuit of an enforceable intergovernmental memorandum of agreement for Camp 4 is consistent, is the county's position that it is consistent with what is contained in the San Ynez Community Plan policies. Specifically, I reference in the bottom of the slide, I'm sure you can all read it, I'll just note that the county, it indicates very specifically, policy number 6, that the county shall oppose the loss of jurisdictional authority over land within the plan area where there is intended use is inconsistent with the goals and policies and development standards of the plan, or, and this is critical, or in the absence of a satisfactory enforceable agreement. In addition, further action indicates that the county shall pursue legally enforceable, government-to-government agreements with entities seeking to obtain jurisdiction over the land in the plan area to encourage compatibility with surrounding area and mitigate environmental and financial impacts to the county. So I just wanted to highlight that section of the plan as it pertains to the agreement. The term, again, the agreement is effective on the latest dates upon which several key actions must occur, and again, they're listed. This agreement does need to be approved by the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors, and that'll be before them for consideration on the 17th of this month, October 17th. The General Council of the tribe needs to approve this agreement. And then there is the provision for dismissal of the county's litigation. And then there needs to be either the determination by the Secretary of the Interior that it does need their approval or not need their approval in order to move forward. The agreement, the term, as the supervisor mentioned, is far longer than what we understand is in place elsewhere in California, and that term is through December 31st of 2040. And there are reopeners provided for in the agreement, and it's a mutual reopener provision. Enforceability. Now on this one, we have added a number of different components to it. I'll go through them and I'll highlight what we've added just to be clear. So there were a number of questions about enforceability of the waiver. So the enforceable agreement, as I mentioned in the past, was specifically directed by our Board of Supervisors. It was one of the key terms that needed to be addressed when we initially began these discussions. So it was one of the first areas specifically addressed within those initial ad hoc committee meetings. So the enforceable agreement protects and secures the stated land uses for the term of this agreement, as we've already indicated. Without a local agreement and an enforceable waiver of sovereign immunity by the tribe, there are no protections. So the next several bullets are what we've added to further provide detail in this particular area. In August of 2015 to March of 2016, as I mentioned before, the waiver was discussed at the ad hoc subcommittee meetings previously, the initial ad hoc subcommittee meetings as I refer to them. On August 30th of 2016, we provided a report to our Board of Supervisors on the waiver of sovereign immunity. And separately, on that same meeting, the Board of Supervisors also considered a law enforcement agreement with the tribe that contained that waiver. So the waiver is consistent with that particular contract that is currently in place between the county and the tribe. But just to clarify a bit further, there are 2 separate agreements that the county maintains for law enforcement services. The first of those, which was initiated on November 4th of 2014, was approved by the board, and there is no waiver in that particular agreement. However, the lack of a waiver was mitigated, and the risk was mitigated by a prepayment provision as part of the contract. The second agreement, which was approved by the board on that August 30th date, does in fact contain the waiver of sovereign immunity, as you also see as part of this agreement. So the specific waiver language is that the tribe expressly and irrevocably waives for the term of the agreement its right to assert its sovereign immunity from suit and enforcement and execution from any ensuing judgment or award, and consents to be sued in the federal courts of the United States and the state courts of the state of California, provided that the dispute is limited solely to issues arising under this agreement. Okay. And then on the next slide, this is an additional slide as well. Believe it or not, that full slide is red. And it indicates that the tribe's general council will vote on the proposed memorandum of agreement. Going back to what I mentioned previously, the tribe's members need to approve the agreement. And if approved by that vote, the general council will approve a resolution authorizing the tribal chairman to sign the proposed memorandum of agreement and approve the waiver of sovereign immunity, so providing an additional protection. The resolution, once executed by the tribal chairman, will be attached as Exhibit D to the proposed memorandum of agreement. And then, as I've mentioned in the past, there are no third-party beneficiaries to the waiver. So I hope that better clarifies some of the terms and the process by which the waiver was achieved.
And I would just like to add here, this is very important to the community to understand this. There has to be an express and unequivocal waiver. It has to be specific to the terms of this agreement, and there has to be a resolution by the tribe adopting it. And if those three things are in place, then there is a waiver, and it can be used to enforce provisions of the agreement in state and federal court. And so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I mean, I know this is a big issue, and I've heard a lot of concerns about the waiver, and I mean, we wouldn't be able to do business, get loans, we wouldn't be able to make partnerships with the county on other agreements with the state for our compact if we weren't able to have like language with our sovereign immunity waiver. And so, I mean, we wouldn't be able to have anything that we have today without similar waivers. So it is legally binding in a major way, and it's always a big thing for the tribe to waive it. So thank you.
All right, our next area is fiscal. Number of questions in that area. As I mentioned previously, the county and the tribe had very differing perspectives on the impact and service costs. As many of you that attended the initial ad hoc committee meeting saw, both the county and the tribe proffered various models regarding the fiscal component of this agreement. That was not resolved in that setting. We did, however, the county did acknowledge the development of Camp 4 will result in some impacts and costs to the county. We also recognize that the county does not have permitting authority over the development of lands held in trust, and that the payments under the agreement do not constitute taxes, exactions, or fees. The payments are approximate offsets, and I've underlined that there, again, recognizing that there are costs, but we also recognize that the tribe provides an array of services, as do the county. So this was an agreed upon amount that it is an approximate offset to the potential losses or impacts to the county, and are intended to support an approximate level of service delivered by the county. So the specifics of the fiscal, this is extracted from the agreement. The tribe is to pay the county a flat annual fee of $178,500 due in 4 equal quarterly payments. The payments expire upon the expiration of the agreement in 2040. The tribe will, however, comply with the terms of the Williamson Act contract on Camp 4 until December 31, 2023, and the payments after the expiration of the Williamson Act contract will occur. If the Williamson Act contract is canceled or terminated through the passage of 1491, the payments to the county would begin upon the completion of the first home. Payments to the county may qualify as credits under payments under the state gaming compact, and the county has agreed to support the tribe in pursuing those agreements, or pursuing those credits, excuse me. And we do have additional information in the summary on that particular topic as well. In addition to the components that I've outlined in terms of the $178,000, the tribe is also required to pay for the transportation and circulation costs related to their impacts. So in the near term, they pay their fair share of costs of a roundabout at State Route 246 and 154, and that is being done in conjunction with Caltrans. And then cumulatively looking into the future, they will contribute to the State Route 144 154 corridor, both the signalization and the roundabouts, and the same on State Route 246. Those costs are still to be determined by Caltrans, so we don't have the exact numbers in here at this point. In regards to the legislation will reference the agreement that we're discussing tonight. The legislation provides notice to Congress that there is an agreement and the tribe has in fact waived its sovereign immunity in order to participate and to have this agreement enforced. As we indicated before, an enforceable local agreement protects the county's interest and does not impair the rights of citizens to go forward with litigation that you may choose to do. The federal courts hearing Camp 4 litigation, not the county, will determine any issue related to the community litigation proceeding. I also wanted to indicate there had been some questions about the Gun Lake Act. So unlike the Gun Lake Act presently before the Supreme Court, H.R. 1491 does not prevent lawsuits. In terms of the scope of the agreement solely addresses Camp 4. Supervisor Hartman mentioned earlier that certainly we explored a number of different options. We had some timing discussions as well, and we resolved to only focus on Camp 4. That was also a component that was discussed in the initial public meetings as well. I will mention, and which is why it's up on the screen, that in the absence of fee to trust reform, tribes are not mandated to secure agreements. In terms of the public process, we had several questions in that arena as well. Many asked why the full agreement wasn't provided on the September 25th meeting date. The reality is that was not complete. Therefore, what we did was we did, to the best of our ability, extract exact language from the components of the agreement that were complete and posted them at that time on the PowerPoint. So most of that was a cut and paste, for lack of a better word, to the degree that we could provide that information to you, and that was our goal, to get that information to the community as soon as we possibly could. We then had public meetings with the full agreement, both on the 5th and, of course, tonight. And then, as I mentioned previously, we'll be going to the Board of Supervisors on October 17th, where they'll formally consider the agreement. In terms of the next steps, we did set the hearing, as I mentioned, on October 3rd, and the board is preparing to hear this item on October 17th. We had the 2 public meetings. Tonight is our 3rd. And then, as I mentioned previously, the tribe will consider this agreement. We'll go to the board. We'll begin working with the Department of the Interior to determine if, in fact, it needs their approval. And then we'll work with legislators to amend 1491 to receive this and reference the agreement appropriately. As I mentioned before, we know that there are a variety of questions that are still out there, and what we will do is continue to receive those questions both tonight and then online, and we will continue to post answers to those questions online and answer them on October 17th to the best of our ability. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Terry. And I think we're ready then to start public comment. Ms. Fisher?
Yes. Good evening. Does anybody else have speaker slips? If you do, feel free to bring them up. So I have 3 slips for 1 minute. The first speaker is Sharon Tate Klein, followed by Kelly Gray, and followed by Richard Crutchfield.
Thank you for hearing us. And speaking of that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? No. Please start over. Of course. The agreement provides that the tribe will pay to the county a flat fee, the $178,500, quote, to offset approximate potential losses and impacts to the county and are intended to support an approximate level of county services to Camp 4 and affected communities, end quote. Private citizens would pay planning and development over $3 million to secure grading permits, etc. How was this amount determined? Was it based on planning and engineering of needed infrastructure or delivery of services? There's a loophole in this modest amount of funding. The agreement specifically says that the tribe may deduct the amount currently paid to the county to mitigate impacts from its casino operations. How then is this a new revenue source? In other words, isn't this a bait and switch deal? And finally, the agreement acknowledges that additional fiscal impacts of, quote, law enforcement, fire, etc., will be mitigated by the county at no actual cost to the tribe. So this means that the citizens are going to pay to support the tribal access in public roads, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kelly Gray, followed by Richard Crutchfield. And I forgot to mention that when the time is up, you'll hear that bell from Lyle.
It's my understanding that the tribe has both a second liquor license and a second casino license. If my understanding is correct, it is my understanding that the tribe has both a second liquor license and a second casino license. If my understanding is correct, is the tribe willing to surrender those two licenses concurrently with the execution of the agreement?
Thank you. The next speaker is Richard Crutchfield, and I got one more 1 minute speaker, so Richard Crutchfield will be followed by Cody Gonsalves.
I'd like to speak a little about tone. I agree that we should proceed carefully and with haste on this agreement. I take exception with the comment, if the legislation proceeds without this agreement, the community has no say. That assumes the tribe would be unwilling to meet with the community to discuss the ultimate use of Camp 4 and other properties. The tribe is here today. Hopefully this will not be the final meeting between the community and the tribe. I sense a willingness from both parties to continue to work together. Thank you.
The next speaker is Cody Gonsalves.
I manage the San Lucas Ranch, which is right across the way from Camp 4 on Armour Ranch Road. My big concern is the traffic. I know it's been brought up, but tonight there's been no solution. 143 new houses, 100 events. Right now, I get 5 to 6 cars run through our fence every year. That's going to go up. Every time we do that, it costs the ranch money. Our cattle get on the road. We've got 1,000-pound animals in harm's way. We've got people on Armour Ranch Road in harm's way. Is there a solution to this problem? Because for us, it's a critical one that could possibly cripple our business. Our liability insurance will go up. You know, I mean, there's several factors we've got to think of here for the local community, the local ag community that's in that area already. That putting a small community in a cultural center in the middle of is going to affect us greatly. Thank you.
That concludes the 1 minute speaker slips I have received. Moving on to 3 minute speakers. The first speaker is Jerry Rounds, followed by Karen Jones, followed by Leslie Moss-Teller.
Hi, I'm Jerry Rounds. I hardly have any time to mentally prepare myself for this, but anyway, I'm going to probably commit the sin of repetition from my talk the other day. I've lived here for 25 years and maybe plus, and it seems to me that in an equal amount of time into the future, things are going to change totally. So I won't be here, you guys probably won't be here, many people won't be here, but our succeeding generations are going to have to deal with this, which I think is a terrible deal. Back to the $178,500, just briefly, I once tried to add like a $40,000 addition to my house. The fire department said I was going to have to add improvements to the road of about $100,000. So the credits that are offset against this $178,000, I think, are going to eat it up in a heartbeat. And I would be surprised if anything ever comes to the county. This whole thing just seems to me, bear with me, I'm repeating myself, that it's I have no doubt that the tribe wants to do what they say they're going to do to this property. But it also seems to me that they have stated that this is the way it's going to be, and then we had to acquiesce. It's kind of like a bully twisting somebody's arm and saying, this is what you're going to do, and we have to accept it. I didn't see, you talked about the negotiations and give and take, but I am curious what give was on the part of the tribe. I just don't see any. So, and the concessions in the agreement are that we have to back off 100%, terminate litigation, and then we have to submit a letter saying that we agree to this whole process, which I think is kind of an insult. I guess the other little things, the guiding principles, what were the guiding principles? I'd like to know that, but I don't expect you to answer that now. And there's talk about trails. Are the trails for the use by the public? Maybe, maybe not. And then just another thing. There's an environmental impact report or whatever, but they talk about nesting birds. And I do know that on the map where it shows the houses at the bottom, that's where longspurs winter, and you know, it's probably a small thing, but birds, when they come down from the Arctic, 1-ounce birds, they expect to find a place to survive for the winter, and that's probably going to be gone. Thank you.
The next speaker is Karen Jones, followed by Leslie Mosteller, followed by Richard Klein.
I'm happy to be here. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And I certainly disagree with most of what is being done right now. At the first meeting, you admonished people in the crowd saying this is not a sporting event. And I agree, it is not. This is serious business. But if this were a sporting event, I would think you were trying to run out the clock right now. I can read. I don't need to be read to. You know, I get it. Just a bunch of papers, bunch of talk, bunch of promises. But I've been on this planet for 6 decades, and everything changes. You know, the first 10 years, there was no gaming anywhere except for Las Vegas. Every decade has brought new change to our country. I see there's 3, 4, how many lawyers are up there? 3 or 4. We may be outgunned, Chairman. There's so many litigators and lawyers involved in this, and there's a reason for that. The law is fluid, it changes. So to say we have nothing if we don't do this isn't true. We have an election every 2 years. So these people, you know, when you talk about the calendar, where we all agree and so it can go on the suspension calendar, I looked that up, and that is, you're right, for non-controversial items. What is this if not controversial? And here's what's cool. We can fix it all. We already did all the paperwork. Our president, Calvin Coolidge, made everybody citizens, encouraged people to assimilate. That was how many generations ago? I mean, my grandmother was alive in 1924, but so much has happened over the years. Things change. Maybe 10 years from now, you'll be able to sell Coke on the reservation. Maybe 10 years from now, there will be no reservation. 60% of your members live off the reservation. I think they want to. To have us all live in little groups based on race or victimhood is frightening to me. It's such a step backward, and it denies me equal protection. This separate but equal stuff just seems so 1950s slave state to me. I can't believe we're having this conversation. I like that people do what they want to do, buy a house. You bought Camp 4, apply for permits, like the gentleman who has to give the fire department $100,000. I don't care how big your houses are. I don't care what you build on Camp 4, as long as you're playing by the same set of rules that I am required to follow. I respect you, Supervisor Hartman, and I believe that you are trying your best to keep your promise, to not cross lines. But you have crossed some lines here. You have definitely crossed some lines, and that disappoints me, because I do think you're a nice person.
The next speaker is Leslie Mosteller, followed by Richard Klein, followed by CJ Jackson.
First of all, beginning this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. How refreshing. Liberty and justice for all. I feel passionately about the duty of our elected officials to represent their constituents. Sadly, that's not being done in Santa Barbara County. It is so noted for the record that the County of Santa Barbara has been and continues to be unduly pressured by the Congress of the United States to the point of their detriment and their inability to protect their constituents. And pleasantly, there are recourses when this happens. The County of Santa Barbara has overstepped their bounds. The alleged gamble, interesting choice of words, by the way, forcing the county to a detrimental MOA is frankly a transparent scare tactic. At best, it is sorely ignorant. At worst, it's manipulative. Pleasantly, citizens should understand that the congressional suspension calendar is appropriate for non-controversial matters. As everyone understands, this issue is highly controversial. Notice has been taken in Washington, D.C. of the 180-degree reversal of Congresswoman Capps' current position, past position. Congresswoman Capps accepted 0 campaign contributions from the Chumash Special Interest Group. Our current representative has indulged in lucrative contributions for many years. This is relevant and makes this issue dirty and controversial. If H.R. 1491 should eventually pass the House of Representatives, the bill would then go to the Senate without prejudice and subject to review, legal concerns, local public input is then sought, separate from the House process. This bill is far from imminent. According to a study undertaken by the Santa Barbara County, Camp 4 lies on the major aquifer. The proposed MOA does not limit water consumption or prevent groundwater exportation. The PowerPoint notwithstanding today, the MOA does not address water exportation, nor does the EA. Camp 4 has the 2 largest wells in the county, and the newest well has been drilled to 800 feet. Every rancher in this room understands a normal well is drilled to 300 feet. This is significant. The county has flagrantly ignored their duty to protect county resources, both in terms of water and sound finances.
The next speaker is Richard Klein, followed by CJ Jackson, followed by Bill Crouch.
Thank you. My wife and I have been residents and property owners in the valley for 29 years. First question I have is, how can residents be sure that this agreement will be enforced? The agreement lacks assurance for residents that it will be enforced. The agreement provides that, quote, tribe and county may agree to reopen negotiations related to Camp 4 if the circumstances of the parties change during the term of this agreement, end quote. What circumstances would apply here? Could these circumstances include a change in political leadership or possibly a change in the economic or fiscal condition of either party? Chairman Kahn, we're proud of you as a neighbor, proud of the success the tribe's achieved, and particularly proud of your success with Hotel Cork, Hadson House Hotel, your apartment development in Buellton, and other properties, all achieved without their being under fee to trust and all developed under the same rules and controls and regulations and fees as the rest of your neighbors. However, the community has spoken out loud and clear. We have many concerns about the proposed agreement. You've presented, including issues of land use, environment, water, fair compensation for the fiscal impact on the community and taxpayers. Where are the changes requested by your constituents? Have there been any changes or modifications to the agreement first presented to us just less than 2.5 weeks ago? The answer appears to be no. What you've presented to us as answers to our questions and concerns have been nothing more than a weak justification of the elements of an agreement developed in secret and is being force-fed to your constituents regardless of the concerns or objections. The way public policy should be developed is reaching out to all affected parties for input and insight on problems and impacts that would inevitably be created. By contrast, in this instance, the business of the people was done behind closed doors in the dark of night, a prime example of finding creative ways to bypass the public policy process in order to pass unpopular and controversial legislation or agreements. Revise or reject this agreement. It's counter to the best interest of the San Ynez Valley, and with the exception of a small special interest group, it's counter to the best interest of all Santa Barbara County voters. Thank you.
The next speaker is CJ Jackson, followed by Bill Crouch, followed by Mike Brady.
Madam Chair, Chairman Kahn, CJ Jackson representing the concerned citizens. I have 4 basic fundamental questions that I'm hoping you will be able to answer. One is the status of the acquisition of this property. As you know, 6.9 was acquired as a gaming acquisition under IGRA. I'd also like to know if this trust acquisition is under 25 CFR 151.10 or 0.11. I'd like to know, and I think a greater duty is expected on how reopeners work, how many there would be, and how they differ from a conflict that you would have where you would invoke the lawsuit provision under the tribal immunity. It is unclear how those situations might work, and since they are the key to the security you're presenting in this agreement, it is important. At the end of the last Board of Supervisors term with Supervisor Farr, Chairman Armenta had made a comment that he sought to have all properties owned by the tribe taken into trust. Obviously, the county took that seriously, but I've not heard one word as to whether or not that was actually the case or whether or not it was an idle threat. Finally, there are 21.5 acres of easements and road dedications on Camp 4. They support and inform the service load expectations for Armour Ranch Road and the others. The service load levels on those roads and the traffic burdens there were called out in the counties and in every other EA comment. And it appears now in your latest document here that you anticipate further roundabouts, further streetlights, which in effect demonstrates a greater burden than what was proposed in the EA and in the FONSI. Therefore, I need to know what the traffic implications actually are, what the status of those easements are, and do we actually have a believable baseline to establish burdens? And if the additional burden rises to that level, are you saying that on Armour Ranch Road and Baseline Road, the county will absorb the cost of that? People at the table, this represents a prayer. It represents a prayer that indeed a community can trust what the tribe is saying. I almost wonder what it would have been like if this proposal had been made in 2002 and 2003, when we all got energized about something else. And I'd like to speak to Darcel. Darcel, it's not a rural feel. This community has a vested interest in something far greater than that. We sacrificed streetlights, curb and gutter, fast food restaurants, all to achieve a far overarching rural agricultural ethic that we're trying to protect. In every meeting I've come forward, Mr. Chair, I've asked, does the tribe endorse that? It would go a long way to the believability here, but I would ask that you look at those details. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Bill Crouch, followed by Mike Brady, followed by Jim Marino.
Good evening, Chairman Kahn, Supervisor Hartman. I'd like to follow up from the meeting last week in Solvang, where Chairman Kahn, I believe you said, at least once, if not twice, you referred to Alternative B as a proposal. The county claims they have an enforceable contract. How do you enforce a proposal? Question. My second comment to follow up from last week was to Doss Williams. He's not here, so I'll take it upon his representative. I think towards the end, well, it was revealed the amount of contributions he's taken from the tribe. Even after he was appointed to the ad hoc committee, he refused to recuse himself and said, quote unquote, that's politics. But at the end of the last session, I felt it was very disturbing that he took the attitude, he turned to the audience and said, I thought, and I paraphrase, you Republicans have Republicans in Congress who could stop this in a very condescending manner, meaning that I think his bias is being exposed. But it's not about Democrats and Republicans, it's about land use, and it's about the judicial right to oppose the illegal action taken by the BIA on the very last full day of the Obama administration. In fact, if the fee to trust action was in Montecito, I don't believe that the supervisor would, his constituents would allow him to serve on this panel given the contributions. To serve another example, if in fact it was about oil drilling in the Santa Barbara Channel, and he had taken the amount of money from the oil companies as he's taken from the Chumash, I don't think he would be able to serve on behalf of his constituents in an ad hoc committee without being recalled. I think given his bias, it contributes to the weakness of this contract for the citizens of this valley. On tonight's issue on sovereign immunity, just to make it clear so we all understand, if in fact the tribe builds a high-rise there, which is in prior to the expiration of the agreement, and the county decides not to bring legal action, the term no third-party beneficiaries, does that mean that no one else may bring any action against that contradiction or violation of the contract? And for us lay people, if you would be so kind to define without prejudice in relationship to the TCA. And as far as gaming, why is there not an explicit contract between the county and the tribe? And I think the other point, on the 30 acres, you're using a little over a quarter acre for a facility and 2 to 3 acres of parking. Why do you need 30 acres? There's something that's not being disclosed here. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mike Brady, followed by Jim Marino, followed by Alex Jones.
I've spent the better part of my adult career dealing with contracts and dealing with attorneys about contracts and negotiating the infinite details. And I can tell you that this contract has so much loose language and so many conflicts that it is unenforceable. Bottom line. And this is what we are basing our agreement with the tribe on. I want to go to a specific, because there's so many things to discuss, it's really not discussable within 3 minutes or 3 meetings or 20 meetings. You've put in bold, capital, underlined numerous times, no exporting of water. I spent a better part of 2 hours today reviewing these documents. Nowhere does it say anything or address anything about exporting water off of Camp 4. And I asked for that specifically, and it has been asked specifically 2 times in previous meetings, and we do not have an answer. I guess I could spend the rest of my 1 minute and 45 seconds sitting here waiting for the response, but it won't come.
The next speaker is Jim Marino, followed by Alex Jones, and the last speaker slip I have at this time is Kevin Walsh.
Chairman Khan, members of the board, good evening. A couple of things. First of all, you mentioned, and I know Supervisor Hartman, you've mentioned it before several times, that this agreement does not bar or prevent any lawsuits. Senate bill or Assembly bill, House bill 1491 provides that
any of the prior illegal acts committed by Amy Dutschke at the Pacific region or the BIA is somehow blessed and made legal by the passage of that bill, thus eliminating the illegal acts that have been challenged repeatedly by many of the people in this group. If there's no legal challenge left, isn't that preventing a lawsuit from challenging those legal or illegal acts? So that's a misstatement that doesn't prevent any lawsuits. Also, several references are made that this agreement refers to the EA. Now, the EA was provided by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They're not a party to this contract. And it has supporting data in there, how they arrived at their conclusion that there was no significant impacts, known as a FONSI. What authority do you have that merely referring to the supporting data in the EA becomes a binding and enforceable term of this contract? So if you have that authority, Mr. Cohen, maybe you can come up with it. I'd like to see it. Land uses in the Dehesa Valley case, you mentioned that one. Unfortunately, you left out an important clause in that letter that was addressed to Congressman Hunter by Mr. Kaysen. He said, well, if you want to make any limitation on land that's going into trust, we need to change the rules. So has there been a rule change that allows the county to place restrictions like the type you're suggesting are being made here? And I don't see that there are really any that have been made. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Khan. One is, what are the services that the tribe has provided to the county that you mentioned? I'd like to know what they are. Public services and infrastructure? How much did they pay for the $6 million it cost for the roundabout at 154 and 246? Or the bridge fencing, $3 million? Or the current repaving, another $4 million? How much has the county contributed or been contributed to by the tribe? And also you mentioned it's imperative or critical that to have housing, you have to have the land in trust. Why? What exactly is it that's required that you have the land in trust to provide housing? We'd like to have answers to those questions. And I'd just like to mention, if you give me a minute, I put some replies out there on the table out there, but they were taken away, which is not the first time that's happened. So what I'll do is I'll give you copies, and if you would, put them online. Thank you.
The next speaker is Alex Jones, followed by Kevin Walsh. Kevin Walsh is the last speaker slip I have. If you have a speaker slip, please let me know.
Hello. My name is Alex Jones. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. Again, I want to start the way I did last time by thanking this amazing group of people for coming together and voicing all of these questions and concerns. I'm not going to waste much time with questions because the list of questions you have must be long enough to run from here to Napomo. That's a long list of questions you have to go down, and they're all legitimate questions. I spoke at the first meeting, and unfortunately I missed the second meeting, but since I spoke, I've just been thinking and talking to people and thinking and talking, to the local people that I know, the young families that I know. And, as I mentioned before, I'm on the Wall of Honor at the St. Anne's High School. So I know a lot of people that graduated from the high school, stayed here, and are raising their families. I can say wholeheartedly, the young families of the Valley do not want this deal to go through. They do not feel like they're being represented, and they feel like they're being taken completely blindsided by this. Young families, one thing you'll know about them, we're busy. We coach soccer, we have after-school meetings, we work 2 jobs. So young families don't get to come and represent themselves at these meetings. So I feel honored to have the opportunity to speak on their behalf, at least the ones that I spoke to. Like I said, I was not able to go to the second meeting, but I did watch it numerous times online. And I do appreciate that the county does, pay to put these online because it gives young family men an opportunity to, see what goes on at these meetings. One thing that was apparent and really kind of sad and weird to watch was Representative Williams fumble and bumble his way through explaining why it's okay for him to take unbelievably large amounts of money from one group of people and then get indignant when we question his conflict of interest. It was really weird to watch, and especially the way he was reading it off his phone, you know, so insincere. But that's kind of the tone I felt this whole process. I usually don't like to speak about people when they're not in the room, but obviously DOS had an emergency in Cuyama. So unfortunately, he's not here at this very important meeting and moment. So I guess I'll pose it to his staff. I'd like to know what group of people, besides the Chumash Indians, have given more money to DOS Williams? He says, oh, well, I take money from both sides, so, you know, that makes me innocent. No, it doesn't. Because if you take $1 from one person and $1 million from somebody else, that's not equal. The Chumash Indians have completely influenced this process. I think it's appalling. Now, my last 10 seconds, I speak to you, Joan. It's not over. We still have a chance. I can only understand the pressure you're under from both sides. You have a choice. It's either sell out the valley to appease the Chumash in your party, or represent your people and defy your party. I can understand how difficult that's going to be for you, but please make the right choice.
The next speaker is Kevin Walsh, and I received another speaker slip. The final speaker at this time, will Kevin Walsh, will be followed by Bruce Porter.
Thank you. I want to talk about the conflicted and confused and contradictory water numbers that are floating around. Sadly, there's probably no bad guys here, but the fact is they're confused and conflicted and contradictory. We need to get that straightened out before we can move any further, and I would like to see this not go forward on the 17th of this month as planned until we've had time to look at those water figures. The two figures I speak of are those in the EA and those that were handed out last Thursday, giving us all here like one business day to figure out what's going on. The EA is well done. It's done by a professional engineer. It's well documented, analyzed, and the presumptions and assumptions of analysis written down. Not true of the numbers we got at the October 5th meeting. For example, and I won't belabor with you too many details, in the summary we got on October 5th, of the water use, total residential water use is 84 acre-feet. In the EA, it's 155 acre-feet. So why did suddenly the water use go down by almost double from 155 to 84? For the vineyard, it's even more conflicting. In the summary itself, this is where the real confusion comes from. It says there on page 2 that there's 206 acres in agriculture and vines, future and existing. So right now and in the future, 206 acres of vines. However, on page 4 of this same document, it says 256 acres existing in future. Why do they need 256 acres? Because you need 50 acre-feet, 50 acres to come out of vines and be available to offset the water use for the project so you don't further overdraft the basin. The basin is overdrafted, more water is being taken out of the basin than is being put back in by nature or by man or by anybody. And that's no fault of anybody's, that's just the way it is. And the tribe, thank you very much, wants to make sure that doesn't happen. But we got to have the water numbers that we have documentation for, and the 84 acre-feet is not documented. There's a conflict. Is it 256 acres in vines or is it 206? It's confusing and conflicted. I think this is an important thing. Why is it important? Because most of you up here are going to meet with me some other venue at some other time, and we're going to figure out how to manage the groundwater resources here in the way the state of California told us to. And we better get these water numbers for this project right here, now, in this venue, and not have to do it in the other venue, by the way, which will also be a public venue, where we're going to discuss who uses what water, and if push comes to shove, hopefully it won't, who's going to have to cut back on what they're using now. Thank you very much.
Are there any more speaker slips in the audience? Okay, then the final speaker we have is Bruce Porter.
Joan Hartman, you and Doss Williams have failed our community. You had the opportunity to begin an historic, respectful dialogue between the tribe and its neighbors in Santa Ynez, but you've wasted that opportunity, squandered it, as you retreated behind closed doors to sign onto a document that does nothing for the people who actually live here. Joan, you promised to bring people together. Your quote, not mine. So let me ask the folks in this room, did Joan bring any of you together as this agreement was being drawn up? Did you include anyone who lives in Santa Ynez outside of our Chumash neighbors? So if you were forced to do this, what did you do for us, the neighbors of the tribe, in this agreement? Most everything was offered up by the tribe way before you retreated behind closed doors. As near as I can figure, the only thing you got the tribe to do was install splash blocks under their roofs and use low-flow toilets. Really, that's the best you could do? Oh yeah, you did negotiate the tribe to give up $178,000 for 17 years, but property taxes go far more than just to the county fund. Loss of taxes and an additional 143 homes will have significant impacts on local schools. Did you negotiate those impacts with the tribe? You didn't even bother picking up the phone to talk to the leadership of our school districts, did you? Instead of throwing all that money into the black hole of the county general fund, why didn't you look for something important to both the tribe and us and find some common ground? Many of us in this room on Saturday attended the memorial for a Santa Ynez teenager who recently committed suicide. Since you voted to eliminate 4 mental health workers and many other social workers because you all have mismanaged county finances, maybe you could have negotiated with the tribe to add a couple of mental health specialists to the tribal clinic for the benefit of all of us. For decades, we've had a shortage of sports fields for our kids, all of our kids, and that includes those from the tribe. Maybe instead of throwing more money into the black hole, you could have negotiated to build a decent soccer field on one of the tribe's lands. That would be a benefit not just for 17 years, but forever for the tribe and the rest of the valley. We need a forum for ongoing and open dialogue with the tribe. As our county's officials have failed us, maybe it's time for us in Santa Ynez to appeal directly to the tribe's business committee for some alternative process. Time wasted, opportunities squandered, a community even more divided. Joan and Doss, you have failed our community.
That concludes the speaker slips I have.
Thank you. Ms. Mosnisic, did you have a few comments to make?
Yes, just in relation to, there were several questions posed this evening that I believe if you refer to some of the summary documents that we provided address a number of the questions specifically related to, again, water calculations as well as status of the tribal hall and the fiscal mitigation question specifically regarding offsets. And if I could just speak to that for a minute. The $178,000 is provided directly to the county. There is not an offset to that $178,000. When we refer to the state compact, it is all explained here, but it indicates that the tribe is allowed to reduce payments to the state, not to the county. So I just want to clarify that. Again, please take a look at the summary comments that we have here, and I believe it will answer several of the questions that were again posed this evening.
Chairman Kahn.
Again, thank you for the opportunity, Supervisor Hartman and Doss and the rest of the board that set up this ad hoc process. I keep hearing about, closed door. We've been meeting with Doss Williams and Joan Hartman for 6 months now, but we've been begging the county for 6 years to have a dialogue. So for that, I thank the current supervisors and the current board for amending the ad hoc process to give us an opportunity to work with them and find solutions. Solutions that make sense for our community. Now, we're here because we want to be here. And I'm going to say that over and over again. We're here to try and shorten the time for housing on Camp 4. We're on task for 6 years of litigation, maybe another 4 years after that, 10 years until we can build homes. But we'll build them. But we want to build them in partnership with our community. And it's important for us to have an opportunity to have a dialogue with the county, something we did not have previously. So for that, I thank the entire board, the 5 supervisors that supported this process with a 5-0 vote to give us an opportunity to work with the county and to give us an opportunity to work with the community. You know, we're very proud of the achievements that we've had throughout the years, but a lot of times it was without county and tribal dialogue. And we didn't have the opportunity because we had leaders that didn't want to talk. And now the current leadership is stuck with the problem. I agree with one of the speakers. This is not a partisan issue. This is a housing issue. This is a people issue. This is an issue to preserve tribal culture, tribal community. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm getting a little bit frustrated because we've come a long way and we've worked very hard. And we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to work in a balanced way with our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kahn. This has been a long and difficult process, and it has been something that I inherited. And the way that the ad hoc was functioning previously was not the way that you deal with in sensitive negotiations. It took us a long time and a lot of difficulty till we could even hear each other, what we had to say. And no question, for me, land use was number one, and the financial still sticks. I do want to make clear that the credit in the agreement is offset against the state compact, and I'm herewith asking Chairman Kahn if he would be willing to withdraw that from the compact, because it doesn't really make any difference. That's a state decision, and what the county does doesn't really matter. I also appreciate how difficult the timing has been. Oftentimes agreements just come together at the courthouse steps and people settle, and perhaps that's what's happened in this case as well. Congress is poised to act, but I would ask the chairman, and I've submitted a letter to ask if we could extend this to October 31st. We would probably go forward on October 17th, but I have a letter asking that we could extend this and get answers to additional questions. We have spent a great deal of time on the environmental assessment, and it's difficult because these formal settings, you can't really have a dialogue even with the community. So, and if we're going to sit down with the tribe and the community and the county, who do we sit down with in the community? It's a very difficult thing. I did an assessment of the risks. I think the change in status of the land, the impatience that was expressed to me very clearly when I went to Washington, D.C., shaped this. I had to do an assessment of the risks and come up with the best solution, the best way forward that I could come up with. Now, I understand the community has a different assessment of the risks, but I believe that litigation can still go forward. And I think the question for many in the community, and I agree, fee to trust requires reform. Whether the Camp 4 case is the way to get that is a big question. I do not believe that's the case. I think we have to work together over the long run to look at some of the inconsistencies in fee to trust law. But the way I read it is that we don't have a lot of say once land goes into trust. That is my assessment of the situation. So I appreciate everyone's intense engagement and we're going to try to get more time, and we will have more answers up on the website. And I'm, again, very appreciative of the many years and decades and investment that many in this community have made. But I think we stand at a juncture where either we can get a great deal of certainty about what's going to happen at Camp 4, or we risk not having that. So that's what I have to say, and thank you for coming. FEDA trust reform. I didn't make the FEDA trust law. It's a 1934 statute that was drawn up by Congress under very different conditions, Depression-era conditions, before gaming came onto the scene. So I believe FEDA trust reform is in order, and I think we need more incentives to create a dialogue between a community and tribes and government. And that's what I'd like to work for next. Thank you, and good night.